Have y'all ever watched so many videos on a specific topic on YouTube that you feel like you're an expert on it, even though you have no experience in the topic? Yeah, cool, me neither. So there's these videos I love to watch on YouTube of people making dioramas, which are these super detailed models of either fantasy landscapes or replicas from movies or games. I've always been fascinated by the amount of creativity these creators use to see everyday items and even trash and turn it into something amazing. So I've decided that I finally want to give it a try on my own. I thought this project would finally be a perfect opportunity to create something from the wonderful worlds of hermits and crafting. Yep, I fell down that Dream SMP to Hermitcraft pipeline earlier this year, and I've had brain rot ever since. So much so to the point that I now have a cat named Mumbo. Look at her adorable, perfect mustache. How could I not? And I do expect all of you to express your undying love to Cat Mumbo in the comments. Alright, getting back to the actual project. The build that I decided to recreate for this project is Grian's Season 9 starter base. Now, why this build out of all of the amazing builds on Hermitcraft over the seasons? Well, you see, Grian was the first hermit that I started watching. I ended up accidentally stumbling across his hardcore series. From there, I binge watched Season 7, Season 8, Third Life, and Last Life, you know, essentially the last 3 years of his content, in about 3 weeks, because I don't know how to consume content in moderation. So it just seemed fitting to recreate one of his builds. And then I also needed a build that was a reasonable scale. I mean, this is my first time creating a diorama. It's probably not the best idea to start out with a mega base. So something like the mansion is off the table. Even though he didn't really spend that much time at the starter base, I still absolutely love the colors and the iconic silhouette of it, so I just thought it'd be the perfect build. So not to waste any more time, let's gather up some materials and let's get started. First thing first, I went and printed out a couple screenshots to use as reference. You know, maybe in hindsight I should have chose a build from a previous season. That way I could have gone to the world download and been able to look at whatever detail I wanted to see. Instead, I had to do my best getting screenshots from Grian's episodes. But who am I kidding? It's not like I need a detailed screenshot of the back or anything. This is a Grian build. Now, so I wasn't going in totally blind. In Photoshop, I went and estimated what scale I think that this should be at. Basically, I started with the scale of a D&D miniature and kind of just went from there. Spoiler warning, yeah, I don't stick to these measurements at all. It's just a really good starting point. Today we're going to be using some foam board, which normally is used for science fair posters, but today they are going to be the walls of our house. Now, I don't mean to brag, but I did take a 3D modeling class in college, where I not only cried over paper for several hours, but I also learned this little trick. If you want corners in your builds that don't overlap against each other, cut the connecting edge at a 45-degree angle to make a little bevel, and then you can place these two bevels together to make a nice little clean corner. I mean, this isn't anything revolutionary, this is in like every other diorama video as well, and maybe I should stop talking about corners before you get bored and click off this video. Alright, now that we have our rectangles, I'm going to mark out where the door is going to be. And just to prove that this is not following the rules of Minecraft, I went and made it a curved door. Yeah, if I want a cute curved hobbit door, I'm going to make it. Sadly, we do need to remove our wonderful cartoon door, and then I'm going to take the shape of it and trace it onto some craft foam. And this is going to become a little arch to go above our doorway. Now, I want it to look like it's actually made of stone, so I'm just going to go in with my pencil and I'm going to freehand a little stone brick pattern. Small details like this are going to help it feel a little bit more realistic at the end. Now, moving on to the side of the house. It's built out to look like a small room with a couple of stone columns on the side. Now, in order to give it this dimension, I'm going to be using this 10mm EVA foam, which I'm pretty sure is left over from when I made my cosplay axe. Good thing I just hoard all my leftover art supplies. Now, these strips of EVA foam are going to be used to make the stone columns, and they're going to be cut at an angle so they're going to match up with the roof. Now it's time to bring out our old friend, the trusty hot glue gun that is probably older than me. Alright, so now we just got to glue these onto the wall, and you gotta be careful not to drop it and to be super precise, or else it'll stick to everything. Professional crafting YouTuber at work here, I tell ya. So after gluing them on, we have this little archway, and I tear out a little spot for a window and then add a little bit as well for a little windowsill. Now this is going to be part of the side room, so I'm adding 2 more foam board pieces as walls, and then I'm going to cut little slits so that it's more window space. Now with a wave of the magical box cutter. Whoa, we've got 2 windows in the back wall! Now it's time to finally start building up this house. I start by adding hot glue to those bevels that we created earlier, and I'm going to make sure to push all the hot glue towards the inside because that doesn't matter what it looks like, absolutely no one is going to be able to see the inside. After gluing on the little side room area, this side of the house space is good, and now we can work on making the tower. Unfortunately, I can't just use rectangles for this, so I'm going to have to get a little bit creative. So I'm going to take this old shoebox and just cut out a couple of cardboard circles. This is going to be the base of the tower, which will just slide to join in with the other walls. Now for the tower's foundation, my plan was just to cut out a bunch of strips of cardboard with the height that I need it to be. These strips of cardboard are now going to be smothered in hot glue and then attached to the base. I'm going to continue and do this all the way around the outside of the circle until I have a little table bay of cardboard. Take the other circle base and attach it to the top. Once attached, we now have admittedly a very scuffed looking cylinder, but good enough to be the base of our tower. Then with Mumbo's approval, we're going to go on and make another cylinder for the top of the tower. This one's shorter, but it also has a bit of a wider circumference, so it looks like it's going to be that room at the top of the tower. I know it looks ugly right now, but this is just the foundation. We're going to take a little bit of EVA foam, and essentially we're going to wrap it in it, and it's essentially just going to work as drywalling for the tower. After all the foam has been wrapped and secured, I finally got a chance to really compare it to the rest of the house and realized that it was just way off in proportions. So I had no choice but to scrap what I just spent the last hour working on. But lucky for me, a can of Quick Oats Great Value brand was the perfect size, so I really just wasted the last hour anyway when I could have just used that. Oh well, at least on the bright side I can still use the top of the tower. I just need to add a little window and the tower is all good to go. For now, the roof is just a folded piece of cardstock with a little corner cut out so it can curve around the tower. For the tower roof, it's going to be more of a cone shape, so for that I'm going to cut out a circle of cardstock and then I'm going to cut a line to the center of the circle. That way I can then fold the excess material underneath and then I just stack up 2 cones to make my pointy roof. At this point, you might be looking at this and still be thinking, yeah, that's kind of resembling the shape of the build, but it also kind of just looks like something a preschooler made in their art class. And I know that's what you're thinking because that's what I was also thinking at this point. Trust me guys, it's going to start looking cooler as we start adding more details. Which brings us to our next step, which should hopefully help shape out the build. The real-life references I'm using have these exposed stone bricks around the sides. This is going to be a great way of adding that stone texture to the exterior, while also giving it that old cottage in the woods sort of feel. To make these, I'm cutting up more scraps of EVA foam, and honestly, the wonkier the brick size, the better. Now I want these bricks to start at the base of the tower and then kind of crawl up along the side, and just start kind of placing them together on what I thought looked cool. And it's looking good so far, but this white glue is taking way too long, so it's time to pull back out the hot glue gun. And from there, I start putting together at least the tens of bricks that I had to put on this tower. Once I felt like I had a sufficient amount of bricks, I started to add even more bricks. But these were made out of thinner foam, that way to create a little bit more variation. Now, for some reason up to this point, I have just decided to ignore the silo, so allow me just to make this real quick using yet another recycled container. There we go, now we can move on. Now looking back at the tower, we have an unsightly seam around the base of it, so we're going to do what we do best and just hide it away. And luckily, adding these foam strips doesn't just hide it, but also adds as a little bit more of a visual element here. Now in Grian's build, his tower just kind of expands and blocks as it goes towards the top. I really can't visualize what that would look like from Minecraft to real life, so I'm basing this off of real life references. And I'm going to replicate their ledge supports. After securing the top of the tower, I could insert these triangles around the ledge, which not only look cool but also help the top and the base of the tower feel more connected. Now moving on with even more foam, it's time to create all the wood features. Starting off with the window. Using a pencil, I can simply press in the wood texture into these 2 strips of foam, and then they become window frames. Some more foam becomes the awning on top, and then this little piece of cardstock gets put into the middle and becomes the middle window frame thing. I don't know what it's called. Same process is repeated on the back for those 2 windows, and then the windows on the side. The planter outside underneath the window is created out of even more cardstock and foam, with some more wood texturing to make it look like wooden panels, and then glued onto the front, and it's adorable. Do the process one more time for the 2 planters on the corner, And then we can make our rounded Minecraft-defying Hobbit door, which starts out by making a tombstone out of foam. At this point, I think I've gotten very good at making little wooden grains on foam. You know, details that probably no one will ever see. A tiny little bit of glue for a tiny little handle. Some triangles of foam now become hinges, and this may be the most adorable thing I have ever made. I want this little Hobbit door in real life. I made a slightly less impressive door for the silo. And now we can take on the daunting task of adding roofing. Okay, at its base, it sounds really simple. Cut little strips of cardstock with little tabs in between them. These will now become our shingles. It then gets placed on the roof with other shingles overlapping over top. Sounds easy? Now do it just 100 more times. Tracing a template, cutting all the tabs. This took me several hours, and then I only ended up with enough to fill up the first panel. And now more for the back. Maybe I'm over-exaggerating, but literally I thought this was going to take me a day to get all the roofing done, and it took me over the course of 2 weeks to do all the roofing, including the towers. It looks really good, I'm glad I did it, it just was so many gosh darn shingles. And I still have to do the towers, so I need to make even more! Alright, I'm gonna calm down now. For these ones, I had to gently bend each of the strips because I needed it to curve around the tower. I think overall this tower turned out a lot more messy just because with the curve of the cone that it just kept on changing the spacing between each ring. We'll just say it just has a little bit of wonk to it. Even more shingles. You know what the funny thing is? I could have skipped over this part in the video. I could condense this down so there's only like a few seconds and y'all would have never known. But no, I want y'all to know my pain over these stupid roofing shingles. Anyway, this one turned out a lot better, and we can move on to creating the last part of the roof. The iconic roof curves that make the silhouette look like a cat and a boot at the same time. To make these curves, we're going to be using a material called foam clay. Much as the name suggests, it starts as a moldable clay material, and then it dries as foam. I wanted to use this material because I wanted a lot of control on how this curve turned out. Since this is such an asymmetrical build, having this curve really helps create balance, so I wanted to make sure I got the proportion correct. It didn't dry super smooth, but we'll just say that's a wood texture. And then this one, which actually kind of looks like a Hershey kiss, and is glued in to be the points of the top of the tower. And finally, we are all done with the detailing, and we're looking a lot better than the preschool class project from earlier. But we gotta bring all this mishmash of material together with some painting. First step is to prime it for painting. I'm going to be doing that with some gesso, because it is what I have on hand. I seal everything except for the walls because they are about to get their own special treatment. I want the majority of the walls to have a rough, coarse stone texture like the deep slate, gravel, and diorite used in the build. So I'm going to be making a special mixture. I got this idea from a Nerdforge video where you combine water, dirt, and glue to make this concrete paint. So I ventured to the outside, touched some grass. I don't know why people keep telling me to do that. Grab some gravelly dirt, and now it's time to make the worst slime that you've ever seen. Combining paint, glue, dirt, and water, I stir it until I think I have a consistency that I want. I did test it on scrap material first, you know, before I went and essentially glued dirt onto the diorama. Not gonna lie, it actually looks pretty good. Good enough so I decided to actually use it. I guess there's no backing out now. I'm very pleased with the results, but could you imagine if I just started putting this on and it looked absolutely awful? If the last month of my work was ruined because I glued on dirt slime to it, I would cry. But luckily that didn't happen, and now we can start painting. I'm going to start by doing all my steps in the silo first, just in case I mess up, it's not on the main build. Starting with the light gray to dark gray stone gradient, I'm going to start with my darkest gray at the bottom on the stone brick base. And I let it spread over a little bit above the bricks as well. I then mix in a little bit more white to make a lighter gray and start blending that in with the previous area. I don't want it to blend too much because this is supposed to be a naturally occurring looking gradient until it reaches that light gray at the top. The door then gets painted to look like a dark red wood. At least that's what I was going for. It kinda dried different than I thought. Now with a mixture of watered down black paint, I'm going to use it as a wash to make it look a little bit more naturally weathered and also get into the cracks I more than likely missed. But now it's looking a bit dark, so it's time to put on some highlights with a dry brush. Dry brushing is when you load up the brush with some paint and then kind of remove most of it. Then when you brush it over, it'll only really stay on the highlights. Then just kind of stipple it around where needed. And we're done with our first stone texture, which honestly, I think turned out pretty good. I'm not the best painter, so I'm pretty proud of this. Now I just need to do it all again on the rest of it. It's looking good, so let's move on to the part I'm most excited for, the roof. I'm going to be mixing this aqua with the copper metallic paint to really try and replicate that oxidizing copper. Returning to the silo in case everything goes wrong. Starting with the pure copper color around the outer edges of the roof, then start adding a slightly muddier version of it mixed with the teal. Working my way up to the final teal color on top. And after only painting in gray for like the last few hours, I'm so happy to finally see these bright colors. And it's also finally making the iconic look of this build. Luckily, since the teal is supposed to look like it's spreading to the orange, it helps cover up the muddy color you get from the complementary teal and orange mixing together. Then to add even more contrast, we get the warp wood color of the arches, or curves, or whatever you want to call them. And the roof trim gets a nice dark copper. Ignore the fact that I just didn't paint the underside of anything. It's totally fine, no one's ever going to see it. One last step for painting is dry brushing a little bit of green onto the bricks. This makes it look like moss is growing up the bricks, and it gives it a way more aged look. Now with all the painting done, I'm going to glue on these little overhangs that I made off camera. Would have made painting difficult, so I just waited until now to add them on. And with that, we're in the home stretch, and that leaves one more thing. Moss. This is literally the step I've been most excited about this whole time. It's always my favorite part whenever I watch the diorama videos. Just adding that little bit of greenery really helps the build feel more alive and believable. And the planters aren't the only thing getting greenery. We're about to load up these bricks with enough moss that will make even B-dubs proud. It's kind of funny that my favorite part is literally covering up all the hard work that I just did painting it, but it really just helps add so much story of seeing the vines grow on the building over time. Honestly, I love creating these stories with the greenery and feel like I could have done it all day. Also, you can use it just to hide unsightly seams. Now I am running out of time for this video, so I'm going to do a montage of the final details right into the final reveal. I am absolutely in love with how this final product turned out. There was definitely times I doubted myself, so to see all the hard work pay off is just such a relief. If I were to do another one of these, and there's a build you would like to see, let me know in the comments, whether it be Hermit, Empires, or any other SMP. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Thank you so much for watching, I'll see y'all in the next video.